Hello everyone, welcome to Auntie M's Musings, where I go down theological rabbit holes and see what I can find. In this video, I'm taking another look at the family feud that is the Abrahamic religions. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are all related to each other, and each one claims that it is the true path to God, and its founder is the only one who could speak for God. But what does that actually mean? To find out, we're going to go back to Abraham again and to the promise that he was given when he became his family's patriarch. When Abraham's father Terah was alive, he was the patriarch of a thriving family. He had at least 2 wives, possibly more. He had at least 1 daughter, Sarai, and 3 sons, Abram, Haran, and Nahor. Sarai married Abram, keeping things in the family. Haran got married too, probably to another unnamed half-sister, and he had at least 2 children, Lot and Milcah, before he died. That happened, by the way, when Terah moved his whole family north from Ur to what is today Haran in Turkey. Milcah married her uncle Nahor, which explains why he stuck around, and Lot also got married and had 2 daughters. Then Terah died, joining his son Haran. It's at this point that Abram has his first recorded conversation with the Lord. "Get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, unto a land that I will show thee, and I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse them that curse thee, and in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed." This is a powerful statement. A great nation, a great name, a blessing to others, with God as his ally, friend to his friends, and enemy to his enemies. Naturally, Abram obeyed. The household split. Sarai and Abram took Haran's son Lot south along the coast with them, while Nahor took Haran's daughter with him back down the Euphrates River. Abram, Sarai, Lot, and their families had many adventures. Abram and Sarai got name changes, Lot's wife turned to salt, all kinds of things happened. But what we are interested in for this video is that promise God made to Abraham, and the drama that surrounded it. How is a person supposed to become the father of nations if his wife cannot bear children? Sarai had a solution, a surrogate, specifically her Egyptian maid Hagar. Great idea, right? Except that Hagar didn't become Sarai's surrogate mother. She became Abram's second wife. Drama ensued. When Hagar got pregnant and had a son, she wanted to be recognized as the primary wife, but Sarah was having none of it. Hagar had to be content with being second, but her son Ishmael was still the presumptive heir. Abraham was fine with this, but then the Lord clarifies his blessing. "As for Sarai thy wife, thou shalt not call her name Sarai, but Sarah shall her name be, and I will bless her, and give thee a son also of her. Yea, I will bless her, and she shall be a mother of nations. Kings of people shall be of her." The Lord continues to tell Abraham that it is Sarah's son who will inherit the Lord's promise, but that because Abraham loves Ishmael so much, Ishmael will also be great. So, let's use a pedigree chart. It's easier. Abraham has 2 wives, Sarah and Hagar. Hagar has a son named Ishmael, who is 13 years old when Sarah finally has her own child, Isaac. There's more drama, but eventually Ishmael indeed does become great, with 12 sons and at least 1 daughter. Sarah dies, and her stuff goes to Rebekah, who marries Isaac. Now Abraham marries Keturah, who has 6 sons of her own. And finally, eventually, Abraham dies. The households all separate. Keturah has her household, Hagar has her household, and Rebekah, Sarah's great-niece and Isaac's wife, has her household. Among all of the sons, Isaac has the inheritance of the Lord's blessings. Not surprisingly, infertility is an issue for this couple. Eventually, however, Rebekah gives birth to twins, Esau and Jacob. She gets a vision from the Lord about the fate of her 2 sons during her pregnancy. Her husband doesn't get the picture until much later. During all of the drama surrounding this family, the goal isn't heaven or paradise or the true path to God. The goal is to be a great nation, a blessing to the world, and to be protected from enemies. None of this says anything about being the only ones who can speak for God. In fact, throughout all the drama of this family's ups and downs, the Lord speaks for himself. He speaks to Abraham and to Hagar, to Rebekah and to Isaac, guiding and directing each of them. As for Isaac's sons, the next inheritor of this blessing and promise is Jacob. After Jacob, well, that gets interesting. Jacob has 2 wives, 2 concubines, 12 sons, and a daughter. I've talked about the women's stories in detail elsewhere. Right now, we're concerned with that pesky divine inheritance. Who gets the blessing and inheritance from the Lord? And here's where things get tricky. If the inheritance passes to the firstborn son of the first wife, the inheritor should be Reuben. But it isn't. Reuben is a mess. He's spineless and easily manipulated, not to mention that he had a brief affair with Bilhah, of all people. No inheritance for him. Simeon and Levi are out. They are blacklisted out. Why? Well, for one thing, because of the way they treated Dinah, murdering her fiancé and taking everything that should have been hers for their own. They were just as bad to Joseph, selling him into slavery and telling their father he'd been killed while watching the goats. So yeah, these 2 are not the good guys. They don't get an inheritance either. Judah is the 4th born, and he's got his own ethical problems. He gets over himself, but not before his daughter-in-law has to resort to some pretty extreme measures. So basically, all of Leah's older sons have issues. Joseph, on the other hand, proves from a very young age that he has a divine gift. He dreams prophecy. Unfortunately, rather than recognizing this for what it is, his father and his brothers all ignore him, belittle him, and, well, Joseph in the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat happens. We have to move Benjamin down to make room for Joseph's boys, Manasseh and Ephraim, because Jacob does something interesting with them. When Jacob is getting ready to die, it's time for him to pass on the blessings of his fathers. That's when we learn about the failings of Reuben, Simeon, and Levi. But before that, he tells Joseph that his 2 boys, Manasseh and Ephraim, are to be counted among Jacob's sons. That means they jump a generation in seniority and are therefore equal in status to the other sons and higher than any of Jacob's other grandchildren. Jacob doesn't say anything about what this does to Joseph's status, but the implication is that Joseph is, if not equal to his father, certainly greater than his brothers. This becomes obvious when the blessings are handed out. Who gets the blessings of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? Joseph does. And by extension, so do his sons, Ephraim first, then Manasseh. From this point on, for some time, the line of Joseph has a leadership role. Until there came a king of Egypt who knew not Joseph. However long this took. Tradition says 400 years. It could have been longer, it could have been shorter. Numbers are more mystical than empirical in these stories. The point is that many generations later, all of the descendants of Israel were in the same boat, oppressed and feared by the king of Egypt. Then who comes along to save the day? Moses. Moses was descended from Levi. And here we start seeing the origin of the concept that the Lord speaks to one person, and that one person speaks for God. No matter how much Moses tries to counter that idea, and he does, the people of Israel are culturally conditioned to think in terms of priesthood hierarchy and God kings and the notion that some people have spiritual authority and power, and most people don't. Moses and the law of Moses is the cultural foundation of Judaism, and therefore of both Christianity and Islam as well. Under Moses, The tribes of Israel left Egypt for Syria, became nomads for 40 years, and then under Joshua began a war of conquest for the land of Canaan, or Canaan, the land where Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, Leah and Rachel had all been buried, and the land where the exhumed bodies of Jacob and Joseph were going to be reburied. And time passes. The tribes divide into two kingdoms, Judah and Israel. They all end up with kings, but the Bible focuses on Judah and its kings, Saul, then David and Solomon and their descendants. Various prophets claim to speak for God, and sometimes there's evidence of that authority going from master to pupil, but most times there isn't. Then Israel disappears into the populations of conquering empires, Babylon, Assyria, and Persia. Judah faces similar problems, but to a lesser extent. At least the Jews keep their ethnic identity alive. Part of that is thanks to a guy named Ezra, who wrote down everything he remembered from the Judaic tradition. So basically, all of this information is based on what one man remembered from his luckily traditional education. Kind of fascinating to see what he thought was important and what he didn't. But anyway, then comes the time of Rome. During the time of Augustus, the Nativity happens, and Jesus Christ shows up, the apparent fulfillment of various prophecies. He not only speaks for God. According to the Christian tradition, he is the literal Son of God. After he leaves, it's his followers, his apostles, who speak for him. Conveniently enough, there are 12 of them. Unfortunately, they mostly die in more or less dramatic fashion. John the Evangelist doesn't, but then John the Evangelist doesn't die. Who knows where he is now, wandering the world doing whatever he does, I suppose. So, who speaks for God? The Jewish tradition is still pretty open. The priest caste are the servants of God, but they aren't the only people who can speak for God. All of the people of the Jews are the children and the people of God, so ideologically at least, anyone could speak for God if necessary, as long as they follow the law of Moses, of course. The Christian tradition is messier. It might be anyone who listens to and follows the teachings of Jesus. It should be the apostles, but in their absence, it became whoever was in charge of the faithful in various communities, which were both multi-ethnic and multicultural. Then the Roman Emperor Constantine claimed the authority for himself, for good or ill, and after a couple of centuries of that, things got even messier. The Orthodox Church of Eastern Rome claims that it's their people, the Catholic Church of Western Rome claims that it's their people, and other Christians from outside Rome argue that it could be anyone, but mostly them. There are wars fought over this. And then who should show up but Islam? Where did they come from? Well, remember all the way back to Abraham and his wives, Sarah and Hagar. Sarah's descendants are the Jews, who follow Moses, and by adoption the Christians, who follow Jesus. Islam claims descent from Hagar through Ishmael, and through Muhammad there is a whole tradition about Hagar's son Ishmael, their relationship to Abraham, and by the same token, their relationship to God. Each of these traditions stakes a claim for who really speaks for God. It's either Moses and his followers, Jesus and his followers, or Muhammad and his followers. There are wars fought over this because, of course, there are. But hang on. Let's go back to the beginning. Back to Abraham's promise, the promise that started this whole thing. The promise that went to Isaac and Jacob, then Joseph and Ephraim, and then a forgotten lineage after that. There's nothing in that promise that says only the holder of this promise speaks for God. The promise is that the whole earth would be blessed by Abraham's posterity, which would be numerous and great. That's the promise. So who speaks for God? The answer is the same as it has always been. The Lord speaks for himself to anyone, anywhere, at any time. If we want to know who has the blessings of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, well, we can't. After Ephraim, that lineage isn't recorded. But if we want to know who fulfills the blessings of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, That's a lot easier. Do you know someone who brings love and compassion to their interactions with others, with all others? Does the light of the divine shine through them to all within their sphere of influence? Are you one of those people? Do you want to be? Then be that. Thanks for watching.